On today's episode of Locked On Suns, a disappointing 10-point loss at home on national TV to the Boston Celtics revealed one thing for sure. This Suns team is incredibly reliant on Devin Booker. Is that good? Is it bad? Is it going to doom them? Is there anything they can do about it? We'll discuss on today's show.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Jase Basketball Show wherever you get your podcasts. A big thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Monday morning. Starting out a new week, starting out a Suns road trip for coverage on all of those games and everything in between. Hit follow or subscribe wherever you're finding us. We are free and available everywhere, including YouTube. If you follow, if you subscribe, you get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday. You can become an everydayer, and you can get locked onto the Suns all season long right here. Today's episode brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? You ever wondered what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. More from Nissan later on, but let's get to the good stuff here, Brandon. Well, joining us, as he does every week, is Brendon Dueñas, a writer at Bright Side of the Sun. Needs no introduction. Let's just dive right in. 117-107, Brendon, was the final score of this game against the Celtics, and I did a recap of the kind of nitty-gritty of the game on Saturday night, so we'll zoom out a little bit here, and I came away from this one, and you can correct me if you had a different read on it or if you see it a little bit differently, but I just feel like this was a game that I chalk up to Durant's amazing, Beal's pretty good, the defense wasn't terrible, and yet they lose by double digits, pretty much rail to rail against a team that just outplayed them without a good player on that side as well. This team just needs Devin Booker. I mean, we're 60 games in. I don't know if it's exactly a hot take to say that 3/4 of the way through a season, but no matter what else is going on, I think this game was a reminder that unless that guy's in the lineup and playing at his best, they're just not good enough.
Yeah, there's a few things for me, a few takeaways. Number one, Boston's really good. Like that's the first thing. That's where I'm going to start. That's a good team, and they're down Porzingis as well, so they're only going to be tougher come playoff time. I think that's the team to beat right now, just top to bottom, just depth, defense, two-way players across the board. They're a good team. And we saw, look, I think the Suns can win games without Booker. Like that Denver game was a good example, but you're going to need outlier shooting performances from a Grayson Allen or like a Royce O'Neal or Eric Gordon. Some of these guys who combined 2 for 12 against Boston from 3, or might have been worse than that, actually. I think it was 1 for 12. So when you combine that with Book missing the game and your role players aren't hitting threes, the margin for error is just razor thin. Like Beal and Durant pretty much have to be putting up like 60+% like field goal shooting from the floor, combining for like 60+ points as well. Like it's just like it just leaves them in a tough spot. So yes, obviously like this is not any like groundbreaking news. The team needs Booker, but I think when you combine that with the fact that they just kind of hit wide open shots, it just makes it really impossible to win games against good teams. Like, sure, they could beat like some, mediocre team on a Tuesday night in the regular season, but this is all about the playoffs we're talking about. This is about winning a championship, and that's kind of the big picture thinking you gotta look at, because they're gonna be playing. The West is stacked. It's gonna be a good team every night. So they need Book, plain and simple.
Yeah. And it's good to point out the Denver game, obviously, right? Because they literally just did it. Funny that these two games were exactly the same score, just flipped, too. But I did a show after that game examining the question of, like, did they turn a corner? Did some of the things we saw in this game feel new, feel replicable, feel like a turning of a page, whatever. And I do kind of think I still feel that way. I think the pace that they played with in that game, I thought the defensive moments, whether it was in the half court with Nurkic, or I thought they had a pretty good transition defensive game, even though the stats would kind of tell you otherwise. Maybe I'm just reading that wrong. So I do still think that's true. But I think your point at the end there is exactly where I fall, which is like they can do it. Like, I'm not saying that they're incapable of winning games without Devin Booker. Maybe in a first-round series, although they're going to face a tough team right away, maybe they even could win playoff games without Devin Booker. I mean, they did it in 2022 against the Pelicans, right? Like, even that's not the most far-fetched thing. Teams are completely different now, of course. But it's more so just, if you're asking me if there's a way to replicate anything with any of these star players out, I think Booker being out is maybe the worst one. We haven't really seen a lot of Booker and Beal, and I feel like that's a little bit disrespectful to the season that Durant has had. But it's just funny to me, I guess, watching some of these games, and I know people felt yesterday, anytime they have breakdowns in terms of the structure on offense, and they had that in the second quarter and at times throughout this game, had it against the Thunder. We all do the point guard conversation all over again when it's just staring us in the face that Booker is going to help that more than any other scheme or player can. And so I do think some of the other stuff is coming along, but they're not hitting their ceiling, especially on the offensive end without Book in the lineup. I mean, that's I guess, maybe that just sounds obvious as I talk through it, but with how weird this season has been, it's like maybe just a reality check at times to just kind of like repeat that to yourself.
Yeah, and I think the big three were just made to play with each other. So when you take one of those three out, it's like defenses can scheme a lot easier against Durant and just send, the entire ship at him and just throw whatever they want. But with Book in the picture, it changes the entire dynamic. So, and that goes both ways too. Like obviously, when Durant will get easier looks with Book and vice versa. And then obviously Beal just playing in a more off-ball role. But I think they just need to perfect, and they've had such a short amount of time to try to get this together when they're all in the court, but just perfecting playing how they did in that Denver game where the ball is just moving everywhere. Everyone's involved. They're not pounding the ball. They need that with a big three. And I think that's when they're at their peak offensively. When the ball is just snapping around the court, it's just like that, 0.5 system essentially, but with superstars that can hit tough shots and bail you out if the possession's just broken or if the defense is not breaking. Then you have those two outlets in a Durant, or I should say three really, then Durant, Booker, and Beal to break that and hit tough shots.
Okay, so here's my question. One of the reasons I wanted to bring this up after a game like that, because one of the things I've said all year is they're running up against, I think, another reality during this stretch too, which might be flying under the radar a little bit, although last night it was kind of punching them in the face, which is that they need Josh Okogie really badly as well. I think there's just no way around that. You can look at the stats, the on-off stuff. The offense does fall off a cliff when he's out there. I kind of don't care at this point. They need him because they have to have some perimeter defensive option that's better than Grayson Allen. And
there's something
Royce
there
O'Neal is a
with
forward.
Him and Royce. Yeah, him and Royce together, like there's some little flashes that I liked when they're on the court together. They need that toughness. So I agree there. Even if it's in small samples, they need that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we know Okogie's matchup dependent. If his offense is just really awful, it's like last night with Saben Lee, which is what I was just alluding to. You just have to bail on it. But they're going to have to play Okogie in the playoffs. But the point being, I think that they're also going to need, and I've been saying this all season long, that you have to hope that part of them hitting their defensive ceiling comes with Book being what he was last year in the playoffs. On ball, creating steals, playing with energy, turning defense into offense. And I worry that he might not be able to get to that point considering how much they still rely upon him on offense. Is that fair?
I think so, but also I need to see more with like the big three all together, because it's like I
We might
think
not be able to. I don't know.
That's
I
exactly.
don't know if
So
we're
it's
gonna
it's a
get
it's
that.
a trick
Yeah.
question. I feel like at this point, I expect there to be just 2 to 3 healthy at all times.
Yeah.
So, but if we
But I guess
can
even
get
when
them,
all three have been out there, like it's not as if Booker is like relaxing. They're still needing like super Devin Booker, and I think that's what I'm saying. I'm worried about is like if you're telling me there's a playoff series where all of a sudden it's like Okogie's unplayable, Grayson's getting cooked. They need Book to guard Jamal Murray, just like 3 years ago in the finals, we watched them need to have Booker guard Chris Middleton when he's like 23 years old in the finals, right?
Yeah.
And it got to that point, and he had to do it, and he did pretty well. I don't know if that release valve is there when you're asking Book to have a 30+% usage rate and a 30+ assist rate and be your clutch scorer and everything. It's hard to ask him to, can you also guard a great player too?
I agree. That's where Beal comes in handy, where I think they need to use him more on ball to make Book's life easier and find that balance where, yes, he could still go out there and, go super Book and just go ballistic, but also he's not working as hard to get to those spots. So I think if you could utilize Beal a little bit more in that primary role with them on the court, because I feel like Beal's done it in stretches, but not as consistent as I'd like to see it with setting up actions. And I remember in the preseason, Vogel was saying if he had to pick between Book and Beal, who's point guard, he said Beal at one point. So I think you haven't really seen that. And I want to see a little bit more of that. And that's where I think Booker can kind of go more in that like Olympic Book role where he's not a role player by any means, but just kind of conforming to a different role than he's used to, which could benefit the team and like help him have more energy on the defensive end. So that's what I want to see out of this big three together, but we're just never going to get it. So I give up, hopefully come playoff time, it all clicks.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I do think a lot of this stuff is going to be matchup dependent. I'm not just closing the book, no pun intended, on Durant being a guy in a lot of different matchups and a lot of different scenarios that can effectively be the point guard. We have seen that at times, but I don't think it's smart to say that that's the primary thing. How many games have we watched where forcing that being plan A offensively has just resulted in disaster? It's not going to be enough. And I think Beal has taken some steps forward, and I think his downhill ability, his speed, his quickness can be a thing that we see. So we'll come back to the upcoming games and maybe circle back to this conversation in a moment as far as what we want to see in this road trip. Book might be back as soon as Monday. But let's keep on the Celtics game first. Did Frank Vogel play things wrong with Bol Bol? What is the ideal setup for Bol Bol to dominate? It's been a question we've been asking all season. I don't know if we're any closer to answering it, but we'll try our best. First, today's show brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Have you ever wondered what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capability to take your adventure to the next level, starting with the 2024 Nissan Rogue. Perfect for city drives and great escapes. With class-exclusive Google built in, your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone and messing with all of that while you're trying to drive. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system, making the 2024 Rogue the perfect midsize crossover for your next big adventure. In addition, the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder has room up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. All right, let's keep it rolling here, Brandon. I wanted to bring in the resident of all of Phoenix, Bol Bol, the chairman of the fan club, the driver of the bandwagon. You have been... it's probably the thing I have to take the biggest L on of this entire season, and you get to take the biggest W. I don't think we've had like a detailed Bol Bol conversation on the pod. Maybe he just hasn't played awesome in some of the games we've talked about or just hasn't been on our minds, but I also missed a week when Bol Bol just really took things to the next level, and I wasn't able to cover it in real time. But he only played 10 minutes last night or so, 10. and he had 13 points and 4 rebounds. Vogel was asked about it post-game and called him a very unique player. Said that, obviously when they're going to zone, a lot of the time that's because Bol is in the game and they're trying to help him out, let's say. And it's a last resort to play him at center. Vogel was pretty honest yesterday in the postgame, which is rare. He likes to talk around things and really give you nothing a lot of the time. In this case, he was being pretty blunt, and this was one of the elements that he was really open about. And I think it speaks to the difficulty of maximizing this guy, even in a game when he's really having it going as a scorer and rebounder. So did you have an issue with how Vogel kind of played his cards when it came to Bol last night when he was being so effective?
Well, you're asking the right guy or the wrong guy, I guess, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, I thought Bol definitely.
It's biased analysis here, folks. Just preface that. But
yeah, no, I think Bol definitely should have seen closer to 20 minutes in this game, and obviously, like there's matchup things that you could point to, and on the defensive end where he could be exposed a little bit against a team as quick as Boston, especially when they go smaller. But I think when you're getting nothing out of some of these other role players, like Eric Gordon was out there 20-plus minutes, didn't get you a single point. You have David Roddy and Sabin Lee getting minutes. To me, it's just like Bol is like a confidence-based player and a rhythm-based player, and I feel like anytime he gets comfortable, like we've seen some very big games out of him. So if you're cutting that short, especially when he's about to get going, to me, it's just like, what do you have to lose at this point? Like it's not like we're playing someone over him that's killing it, and like you just can't keep him off the court. Like to me, it's a no-brainer. Like I think that's the one thing I look at yesterday, and I'm not saying it's guaranteed to work, but like give it a shot. I mean, we're still experimenting here. Bol was efficient offensively, even if he's killing you on the other end, which I think that could be a little grossly exaggerated sometimes. Like, yes, he can be exposed, but it's not like the guys that are filling in for him are defensive stoppers either. So
that's my thing too. It's like, I get it, but it's almost like
overthinking.
Yeah. The main thing is what you just said, which is what are the alternatives? Like, we're not talking about, honestly, like I would even be more okay with it if Thad Young was getting minutes, because at least they kind of play the same role, and I'm interested to see what Thad can do, but he's getting benched. So it's like,
that felt like a Thad game too to me, and nothing.
Agreed. So. And like, okay, so the defensive thing, I obviously am not going to be naive and like pretend as if he's some kind of stopper, but the defense has been, and this is, on-off stuff with a guy who plays so little and has played in such varied roles and with varied lineups, and any on-off stuff for the Suns this whole season outside of the stars is really hard because of how many different versions of the team there have been. Same as last year. But that said, the defense with him on the court has had a 109 defensive rating. With him off, it's been a 116. That doesn't tell you the whole story, but it's one of the things you would look at. You look at his rim protection numbers, they've been excellent. He fouls a lot, but not cripplingly, like where if you put him in a bad situation, he's just going to instantly be in foul trouble. And we're still only talking about a guy who plays a handful of minutes. Even if he played as much as you suggested, 20, okay. Is he really going to get 6 fouls in 20 minutes? No. So let him use his fouls, even if that's what your concern. And I don't think he's so bad that it's going to blow up the flow of a game. Like, there are legitimately some players on the defensive end of the floor who are so bad that the offense is going to realize it right away, shift everything toward attacking that player, and kill you. I just don't really think that's what Bol Bol is. I think if he has to switch out onto the perimeter, it can go fine. Maybe he gets blown by, but you know who else does? Every other player on the Suns roster. So I am not really buying that. And it's like, okay, if you play him at center or power forward and maybe like Tatum or even Horford posts him up, all right, you live with that. Not every player is perfect. So I just really find it, we haven't seen a game where the defense just collapsed because Bol just embarrassed himself getting tied up and falling down and fouling guys. And just, I mean, we did early in the season and he didn't play much, but recently not so much. So I just really don't get it. And I think the obvious solution, even if you have those problems, and Frank Vogel studies this stuff closer than me, knows what's working and what doesn't, knows obviously the confidence aspect you talked about. Maybe he knows if Bol's getting attacked, it's just going to demoralize him and the offense is going to, whatever. I don't see why not play him in some jumbo lineups more often, which is what we were seeing early in the season. And that's one of the things I've harped on all year. It's not always possible. Nurkic was a bad matchup last night, but that's where I think somebody like Thad could come in or hitch his minutes more to Durant, whereas he was playing, it felt like, more with Beal last night, where he can kind of just be a roamer on defense and not have to be guarding in the post, but also not having to be guarding, Tatum necessarily. Have him guard Sam Hauser or have him guard Cornet even. I'm not super worried about maybe the rebounding, but not, Cornet's not going to post him up. And Cornet's not going to be jumping over Drew Eubanks. So I'm going on a long rant, but I guess shortly to say it, I agree with you completely. And I've come around on Bol, and I just think when the talent is there, even if there's limitations, with how thin this team can feel at times, it feels very goofy to say, let's not play a guy who's producing.
Yeah, free Bol. And look, I think outside of Kevin Durant, he's the best shot contester on the team defensively. Like that's a skill. Like you could say what you want about him on an island, getting blown by, sure. But when it comes to contesting shots, I think like he's probably the second best outside of Durant when it comes to impacting and just timing and how tall he is helps. But just impacting the game on defense, like you at least have that calling card. So even if everything else isn't working out, like you said, on the help side, he can block shots and contest and come if he's playing off Nurkic or another big. That's kind of the perfect world for him, I feel like. So yeah, I think defensively, like he's probably better than a lot of these other alternatives. And anyways, so just free Bol. We need more Bol. Let him get his confidence going, and yeah, I mean,
it's a credit to him, like confidence wise too. He had a shooting slump and he weathered it.
Yeah,
he's not taking as many maybe as you would have liked earlier in the season, and maybe that speaks to some of the confidence stuff. But past 2 games, shots are going in. He's taking the 3 again when it's open. That was bad for him early in the year. He would pass up open shots because you could just tell he was in his head about it, and I think that harmed his playing time. But that hasn't been an issue the past couple. So yeah, I just think
turning it over. Like that's the other thing. He's not turning it over, and that's when he was younger. That was kind of his fault offensively. Like he would make some incredible plays and highlights that would stand out, but then when it came to just playing smart and within the flow of the offense, there was just things he would mess up on, which he's not doing anymore. Yeah. So I think, to me, if he's not doing that, he's not hurting you on offense, even if he's not hitting his shots. Like that's, to me, you just got to get him more minutes.
It feels like a classic, like coach's worst enemy kind of player. And I think Frank just needs to accept it at this point, Like, if fans can accept that Josh Okogie's going to be playing and we have to deal with the offensive ramifications of that watching this team, I think Vogel can accept that Bol's going to need to play and deal with the, sometimes fluctuations in
Bol's defense is better than Okogie's offense. I'll say that.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. And it's like, if Vogel has come to terms with the fact that Okogie's going to have to play, and obviously we can understand why Vogel is a defensive guy, Okogie, probably is everything he wants in a player. But, this is not picking among a bunch of great options. And at a certain point, it's like perfect example too from last night. Mazzulla just understood that Cornet was going to be a good matchup and rolled with it. Do you think Mazzulla is like loving every minute of the Luke Cornet experience? No, that guy has a bunch of limitations, but he kind of helped them win a damn game out of nowhere with 14-6 in 20 minutes in a big game to get their season kind of back on track. So you just have to accept stuff sometimes and figure out how to make it work rather than kind of always looking at why it's not. And I think that's where we are right now with the Bol minutes, is just picking nits or finding holes in the argument. And it's like, yeah, he's just one of the better players on this bench. And at a certain point, that's all that matters. Let's get to this road trip, what to expect, what we're watching for, coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality candidates, quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I have told you time and again that my job came directly from a LinkedIn Jobs posting. I was in the market, I was looking, I was poking around the job boards, daily. Let's just say I was a little desperate. But LinkedIn really was the difference maker here for me. Personally, I found the posting because the board, the search system knew, hey, you're qualified for this. This is a good fit for you as the candidate. And then on the other side, they were able to see that I had the qualifications. They were able to connect with me. I messaged back and forth with the hiring managers a little bit. I knew that I was qualified based on what the posting said. And we were in an interview in a week. So it's not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals. A bunch of people use LinkedIn. And hiring is easy when you have that many candidates. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the resources, which is why they make it easier. 2.5 million small businesses, to be exact, use LinkedIn for hiring. So become one of them. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's close this out, Brandon. Let's spend a few minutes on this road trip. We got hot about Booker and Bol, so we'll preview stuff is sometimes makes us look dumb. So maybe it's better that we emphasize this part of it a little less. But it feels like Book could come back. That's bullet point number 1 as we talk about this road trip. But it's not going to be easy. Cleveland, Boston, and Milwaukee are talking about the top 3 seeds in the East, all in a 4-game road trip, all far away on the East Coast, although it kind of circles back to the Midwest on both ends. And then a nice break afterward, 2 days off following an early game on Sunday, March 17th against the Bucks. But what are you watching for? Are you looking at the standings and if the Suns can make a push? Are you looking at some of the structural stuff we talked about at the top? They actually have an even longer road trip against a bunch of West teams coming up not too long, but this is the last big East road trip they have, and those tend to test teams. What are you looking at?
Yeah, no, you said it best. It's going to be a great test to kind of wrap things up. And I think my prediction is Book will be back Monday against Cleveland. It's a good time for him to come back because they'll have a couple of days off before that Boston game. And then it goes straight to a back-to-back. So that could be one of those situations where he plays those first 2 and then sits out against the Hornets. And, I'll just go out on a limb here and say I think they're going to go in Cleveland, take down the shorthanded Cavs, and then 2 days later or 3 days later, whatever it is, go into Boston, give the Celtics a very rare home court loss with Book showing up and get their revenge, and then have a letdown the very next day and lose to Charlotte. And then go out and take down Milwaukee in that 4th game. That's my official prediction. Okay. I'm just throwing it out
3-1. Yeah, the Cavs part of this, definitely they're catching them at a good time. Mobley and Mitchell, I believe, will miss that game. And Garland has not been the same guy this year. They've been susceptible, although Dean Wade might be the MVP of the league now after, single-handedly coming back against the Celtics on Tuesday last week. But that one I feel decently about. I actually would be okay if maybe Book did not come back for that game because I think they could win anyway. But when you start thinking about it that way, I know that can run into some issues. That Hornets team, not that it's the one that probably nobody cares about. I will just tell you right now, I was out of town, as people will know from the fact that I did not post episodes for a week when Dune 2 came out. I have still not seen it because my wife and I's schedules have been screwed up. I think that Friday is when I'm going to be able to see that movie. I'm not going to be watching the Hornets game live. But what I will say is that team, just look at the box scores of who's been playing. It's like all the guys they got at the trade deadline and then Miles Bridges and Brandon Miller. It is a rough group of guys, to say the least. So hopefully, even with Book out, if he were to rest or whatever, they could figure it out. But yeah, I guess the one I'm maybe looking at the most is, well, how does Book affect the Celtics matchup? I think is obviously important. I think, with that one, it's like even just allowing Boston or I guess forcing Boston to have to account for one more guy makes them a little less comfortable with the primary matchups, I think. And obviously, I honestly think the Suns might match up better with the Celtics when Porzingis is in there. Maybe that's a stupid thing to say, but I think that they can kind of manipulate him in a way that they weren't able to with Horford.
Bol Bol.
So that'll be on my mind. And then the Bucks, we haven't seen the Suns play a healthy Bucks team because that last one, I believe, was just Giannis, Brook, and Dame, and then Middleton went out with the ankle early. So that'll be big too. It's just sort of like the finals preview road trip, I guess. The potential finals preview road trip. In those games, it's like you're not going to see them until then, so it's not always one that holds the most weight. But yeah, maybe the best way to put it is what we both said, which is just kind of like a measuring stick kind of tune-up more than anything. And you want to win those games because you want to prove to yourself that you're coming together. We all saw how fired up Frank Vogel was after that Tuesday game. Let's see another one of those.
Yeah, I think 3-1 should be the goal. And also getting at least 3 of those 4 games with the big 3 all playing together. To me, that's even 2-2 with like all 3 of them playing together is a pretty successful road trip. Like, just it's more about building chemistry than it is wins at this point, because I think obviously the West standings are important, but it's going to be pretty tough no matter what you do. So you can't really get too caught up in that. To me, it's just like get the big 3 healthy, get them more time to play with each other, enter the playoffs with those 3 healthy. That matters more than who they're playing in the first round. So that's what I'm looking for. Just stay healthy, get reps.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. As a standings watch, though, the Wolves and Nuggets are now tied for the 2 seed, basically. The Clippers are at 4, game behind those 2. And the Suns have now technically fallen to 7, although, the Kings have played 2 fewer games than them, so it's kind of hard to measure right now. But if you're keeping track of things, maybe we do see the Suns target that Wolves matchup, but I think there would have to be a lot more separation before you could even feel like you're really going to be able to have any control over that. So I would not expect that to start in the next 4 games, but just something to keep an eye on. The Suns do, I believe they play the Wolves one final time on April 5th at home. So that'll be a big game, but a lot of time between now and then. So I'll have a recap of that Cavs game Monday night. Obviously the same for the Celtics game Thursday. Couple of guests lined up in between. Hit follow or subscribe so you do not miss any of that. I will catch you throughout the week. Read Brandon at Bright Side of the Sun in the meantime, and have a great Monday.